Hello and welcome to Crochet Business School podcast. I'm Kelly and I'm here to help you discover all the ways that you can create your own dream crochet business. Your business does not have to look the same as anyone else's, and you can do it the way you want. So what do we have on the podcast today? How do I choose which yarns to use? Which yarns you use in your creations can play a big part in how valuable they're perceived. Yarn quality is very important when it comes to getting your reviews. It won't affect how easily you sell it, but it will affect if your customer becomes a repeat customer and how they review you. Cheaper yarns, although it's really tempting to start off with the budget ranges, they tend to be scratchier, even when they're labelled as baby yarn. That's just a name. It doesn't actually mean they're soft. And the colours tend to be more garish. That doesn't mean they're bad to use. It just means that they can have a cheaper look once you've got them in front of you. Especially when you have a higher quality of yarn to compare them with. You can tell the difference between a more expensive premium brand of yarn and a cheaper brand of yarn by comparing the colours side by side. It becomes quite obvious once you see that. And you don't want your customers to have the perception of you're doing things on the cheap. It's not a good look, and it's not a good reputation to have. So while you may not be able or want to use the expensive yarns, I would always recommend we're going with a mid-range. I would avoid the budget ones. So I'm talking about the ones where it's £1 a ball. As tempting as it is, I wouldn't. These types of low-cost yarns are generally sold now in supermarkets and budget stores. And the other thing about them is they tend to have short runs. What I mean by that is the manufacturer orders a set number of balls of that yarn, they sell that, and you're very lucky if you will see that particular yarn appear again. What this means is that you have a very limited amount of yarn that you can use for your products. You'll have to retire any pictures with that colour from future use once it runs out, because you won't be able to get hold of it again. So I would recommend avoiding these yarns, especially if you're going to be having a product range which you want to keep for a year or so. Something to bear in mind. You also want your mid-range yarn that you go for to be also long running. You don't want it to be discontinued. You don't want to be using limited editions. So sticking with the well-known brands that you know are going to keep going is the best idea, really. Stylecraft, Karen, Patterns, all very, very well known. You've got Paintbox, which is Lovecraft's own brand. I don't see Lovecraft's going anywhere anytime soon. It's so popular, and there's nothing indicating that's going to go wrong, so that's a good brand to use as well. Red Heart is a very popular brand in the States. It's not seen so much here in the UK, but the US yarns are starting to filter through at a better price range. But look for something that's really popular but isn't bottom budget. It's the colours that give away these yarns, and once you get hold of them, they can be scratchier, and that doesn't always go away once you've washed them in softener. You want your customers to be able to pick your make out of the box and go, wow, I love the feel of that. Crochet isn't just about the way it looks, it's the way it feels as well. If it's something that's worn, you definitely need something that's soft to the touch. So avoid the budget yarns like the plague for anything that's going to be worn. The other thing to think about when choosing what type of yarn you're going to use is the fibre it's made from. If you're selling based on your eco credentials, is your yarn eco-friendly? So you need to avoid acrylic, as that is just spun plastic. Polyester and nylon are the same. Wool is actually the most eco-friendly yarn there is, as it tends to be homegrown, is sustainable, and it doesn't need as much processing as cotton does. So while cotton is a great yarn for vegans, it doesn't have great eco credentials because it needs a lot of processing and washing and dyeing. The same with bamboo. It feels great and again great for vegans, but its eco footprint is actually quite large. Another thing to think about when choosing your yarn is how it looks once it's made up. Some yarns look better than others once they're made up. Mohair is notorious for looking fluffy, and your customers just may not like that look. Cotton is very clean and stitch definition is really good with cotton. With acrylic, not so good, but it is a bit stretchy, which for wearables is preferable. And that brings you on to another consideration, which is, how do you care for it? If the yarn you're using needs to be flat dried, hand washed, and stretched into shape after washing, that becomes a big deal to care for. It's a bit of a faff, and your customers may not have the time to do that. So you need to be very upfront with care instructions. And in today's busy lives, you're going to need something that's easy to care for. Acrylic is very, very easy to care for. No problems with that whatsoever. You just chuck it in the wash, take it out, dry it. Job done. Cotton isn't so bad. It needs a bit of a press to stop being wrinkled, but fairly easy to care for these days. Wool takes a bit more care. If it's dried in a tumble dryer, it can felt and shrink, horrendously shrink. So that's something also to think about. And you will find customers for all of these types of yarns, but you do have to be upfront about what you're offering. And for ease of your customer knowing what to expect from you, I would stick with just a couple types of yarn and just make it really clear what types of yarn you use, why you've chosen them, and how easy they are to care for. But for all of these considerations, I would definitely avoid those low budget yarns. As tempting as they are when you're starting out and don't have so much cash to play with, once you get your eye in, you can really tell just by the colours. And it can cheapen your brand. So it's just something to think about. Just have a think about all those considerations and then choose what's best for you and what you think that your audience would prefer. What would your customers prefer to have in their hands? What is their biggest preference? Did they value the quality over the fibre type? Do they care about how sustainable the yarn is? Or do they just want to avoid anything that comes from animal products? Have a think about it and think what suits your customers and choose your yarn from there. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope this has given you something to think about and something to incorporate into your business so you can grow those crochet sales. If you have any questions and would like to carry on the conversation more, then come on over to our Facebook community, the Crochet Seller Support Group, and you can ask your questions and get the support you need from fellow crocheters, and I'll be in there too. You can also join our newsletter list for tips and advice straight to your inbox. And stick around for the next podcast. It'll be out again in a few days' time. And if you'd like to, I would really love it if you would leave a review for the podcast and subscribe. And that really helps us grow and to help more crocheters like yourself. So thank you for joining me, and I shall see you next time for the next episode. Bye for now.